Uh, a very good morning, everyone, from CSIR NEIST, Jorhat, Assam, India. On behalf of the entire team of IVWGST 2022, it is my pleasure to welcome you all today to the second day of the third International Virtual Workshop on Global Seismology and Tectonics. And thank each one of you for attending the first talk of this workshop by Dr. Shailesh Nayak from NIAS, India, who delivered a talk on the topic is scientific drilling in Koina, an experiment to understand triggered earthquakes. Today, we have with us Dr. J.R. Kayal, ex-Deputy Director General of Geological Survey of India, as the session chairperson, Dr. Ajay Manglik, Chief Scientist from CSIR, National Geophysical Research Institute, Hyderabad, Dr. Debojit Hazarika from Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology, Dehradun, as the session co-chairperson. The keynote speaker of today's lecture is Dr. Abhijit Ghosh, who is serving as an associate professor at University of California, USA. He is also an seismological research letter, commonly known as SRL, published by the Seismological Society of America. The participants will come to know more about him from Mr. Chandan Dey, who is a senior research fellow at CSIR, NIV Jorhat. Now, may I request Mr. Dey to read out an illuminating biodata of Dr. Ghosh. Over to Mr. Chandan.
Thank you, Anvisha. Good morning. It is an absolute honor for me to introduce Professor Abhijit Ghosh, who, as Anvisha already mentioned, is presently serving as an associate professor at the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences of the University of California, Riverside. Professor Ghosh is an earthquake seismologist, and his core research interests involve understanding the physics of earthquakes, the process that control them, and their associated hazards by examining a wide spectrum of fault slip across a broad range of spatial and temporal scales. Professor Ghosh completed his PhD in geophysics from the University of Washington in 2011, after, of course, completing his master's degree from the Calcutta University. He has been the recipient of several awards and research grants, including the GeoPrism postdoctoral fellowship at the University of California, Santa Cruz, and NSF research grant. Professor Ghosh has published more than 30 papers in several reputed journals, including publications in Nature Geoscience, GRL, SRL, JGR, etc., and also has conferred editorial role for several journals, including the SRL. Of course, that was a very summarized bio of Professor Ghosh, and I am very excited to listen to his keynote lecture today, the topic of which is Structural Complexities Control Rupture of the Himalayan Megathrust. And the chairperson for today's session is Professor Kayal sir, and Professor Vivit Suranto and Professor Debojit Hazarika are the co-chairpersons. Now, may I request Professor Kayal sir to kindly share his initial remarks and take over the proceedings. Over to you, Professor Kayal sir.
Thank you, Chandan. Thank you so much. I think we all know Professor Abhijit Ghosh, and we all are looking forward to understand this complex structure dynamic in the Himalaya. I think one of the most attractive and interesting topic for all of us. So I think without lengthening my talk, I straight away invite Dr. Abhijit Ghosh to enlighten us on this topic. Thank you. Over to Annesa, please.
Dr. Ghosh, you can start your talk.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Kayal, Anisha, and Chandan for this wonderful introduction. I appreciate that. Aap sabko namaste. Good morning, everyone in India. Good day, everyone, anywhere in the world, whatever time zone you are in. Hello, everyone. I'm Abhijit Ghosh from University of California, Riverside. My friends and colleagues in the US know me as Obi Ghosh. So sometimes you might heard me as Obi. I would like to begin thanking organizers for inviting me to talk about my research. This is a wonderful virtual workshop with plenty of great science. I'm really enjoying it, and I'm delighted to participate in it. A big thank to Dr. Shantanu Borua and the organizing and advising committees, staff, and the government officials for supporting this. There's a lot of work in the background, and I really appreciate it. So back to the presentation, I would start by acknowledging my students, colleagues in this study. This is a collaboration between my university, University of California, Riverside, Stanford. From Stanford, we have Simon Klempler, University of Texas, El Paso, we have Aaron Velasco, Marian Karplas, University of Oregon, John Neblek, Montana State University, Mary Hubbard, of course, my colleagues Roby Dooley, Matt Mendoza, Boli, Jian Zhu are my current and former graduate students. And this study is mostly funded by National Science Foundation in US. And the wonderful work that has come out from this particular project, but I'm going to focus mostly on the work that I have done in my earthquake seismology lab at University of California, Riverside. But there are other great science that has been produced by my colleagues and friends. So please, if you are interested, take a look at those. If you're not familiar with my research, I work on both fast and slow earthquakes. And by fast earthquake, I mean traditional garden variety earthquakes. You know, you look at P and S waves, you pick it, you locate it, etc. And slow earthquake is relatively new. The most common seismic signature of slow earthquake is tremor. That has been one of my focus. I developed an algorithm array-based algorithm to detect and locate a slow earthquake tremor automatically using small mini arrays. But not just tremor, there are other seismic signature like low frequency earthquake, very low frequency earthquake, etc. When you come to the fast earthquake spectrum, you have tsunami earthquake. And there are lots of other things that are kind of in between these two spectrum. You can think of seismic swarm, aftersleep, creep of fault, even glacial earthquake, landslide. And these phenomena are thought to be kind of in between the spectrum, between fast, traditional fast, and slow earthquakes. So my research goal is to kind of study earthquake holistically, both fast and slow earthquakes, to understand controlling factors, interaction between them, stress dynamics, and ultimately the physics of earthquake. So today, of course, I cannot talk about everything here, but I'll focus on a traditional earthquake, specifically the magnitude 7.8 Gorka earthquake, because I thought that would be an interesting topic for this audience. So I'm sure you have, you know this, but just for the sake of completeness, there is a magnitude 7.8 earthquake in 2015 in Nepal, and it occurred along the MHT, main Himalayan thrust. This figure is from Elliott and colleagues. That's the geometry of the main Himalayan thrust they have used. It's called flat ramp, flat geometry, and that earthquake occurred right here, part of the flat and part of the ramp. And this 3D picture below show a slip model based on geodetic data. Right here, majority of the slip, and these dots show the rupture propagation. So rupture propagated unilaterally from west to east. So that's kind of the short story. But it's obviously a little more complicated than this. So same year, there is a paper in Nature Geoscience by Whipple and colleagues, which is very interesting. They talked about many different models that are out there, model of MHT, main Himalayan thrust. So each of these different color dots, lines are different models in this part of the world. And they basically highlighted that there are many different models of MHT, and no matter what existing model you use, you cannot really fit the data well unless you introduce some steeply dipping structure, which is these two structures. So again, they argue that to explain the geodetic and geomorphologic data, you have to have some sort of steeply dipping structure. Otherwise, you just cannot explain the data. Again, no matter what geometry you use. So two things to remember here. The fault geometry, even though we like that flat ram flat geometry, but we really do not know the details of that geometry. And then again, even if you use that geometry, you don't really explain that data very well. So right after the magnitude 7.8 earthquake, we went to Nepal and deployed a seismic network, a fairly dense seismic network, about 50 some stations covering the entire rupture area. So each dot is a station. Red star is the epicenter. 7.3 green star is the largest aftershock, Kodari aftershock, that occur after 2 weeks from the main shock. So that was fun field trip. Here's me working on a seismic station in the town Gorkha, and you can see my friends, curious friends, looking at my laptop and the stations. This is an unfortunate event. Many people died, thousands, but it is not surprising. It's earthquake-prone area, Himalaya, right? And before this event, Roger Wilhelm wrote this paper in Science where he put almost 8 magnitude events certain in this particular area. And that is what happened in 2015. So it is not surprising, although it is unfortunate. It was devastating for Kathmandu, the big city in Nepal, but also villages, kind of interior villages. I hiked around installing station, servicing station, and I have seen some of those unfortunate, tragic incidents. Some estimates, at least 8,700 confirmed deaths. These are based on a government figure. Tens of people died in India and Tibet. Many houses, thousands, hundreds of thousands of houses damaged. 3.5 million homeless. Many historical places are damaged, road destroyed, landslides, so on and so forth. So it was quite damaging earthquake in Nepal. So I think of this talk in 2 parts. And in the first part, I'll talk about the rupture dynamics of Gorkha earthquake. And then in the second part, I'll talk about the structure. And hopefully in the end, we can connect the rupture dynamics with the structure. And hopefully I'll convince you that the structure has an important role here to control the rupture dynamics. So let's begin with rupture dynamics. So to study rupture dynamics, I have used 4 different global seismic arrays. So one in Japan, one in US, one in European, and one in Australia's. And I combine all those arrays to back project to track the rupture propagation, where rupture starts and how it propagates. Now, back projection is nothing new. There are multiple papers that has already been published showing the back projection starting from west unilaterally moving towards south, east, southeast. So that's nothing new. The new here is using multiple global arrays simultaneously. And why that is important? Because I'll give you an example. So if you use single array, in this case we are using Japanese array, so that's the bottom panels. You can see what type of resolution you get. So you have this big elliptical array response function, essentially. And basically what you see in the paper is the centroid of this one dot. But actually, if you plot the entire array response function, it will cover the entire Nepal, probably. So it's a large, essentially, not very high resolution. Now, same data, if you use 4 different arrays, because of the azimuthal coverage, you reduce the uncertainty and enhance the resolution quite a bit. So you can see upper panel, same time period, you see a much smaller array response function, which translate to much higher resolution. So using and combining simultaneously multiple array, we are able to increase the resolution quite a bit. So that's one advantage. And the second advantage is this, that we can extract more detail of the rupture propagation. And that is because different arrays are sensitive to different part of the rupture because of the directivity and polarization effect. So for example, here I have plotted all 4 arrays in 4 different symbols, and it is color coded by the rupture time. So it starts with blue, 0 seconds, start of the rupture, and then it propagated east, southeast. But at kind of in the middle of the rupture, you can see that the rupture is bifurcating. One is going kind of up deep a little bit, one is going down deep a little bit, and leaving a gap right here to be filled by the largest aftershock of this Gorkha earthquake. This is magnitude 7.3 Kodari earthquake. So using these 4 different arrays, we are able to increase the resolution and get the details of this rupture propagation. And what we see, that rupture actually bifurcates into 2 branches. It started kind of in the middle of the rupture, and it propagated to the end as 2 branches of rupture, not one single branch. Now, I can show you a sleep model. It's from Caltech, published in Science. It is based on geodetic data, completely different data set. And you kind of see the similar pattern here, 2 branches of rupture, one along the up deep, one along the down deep. Very similar sleep model, just like the rupture propagation, even though completely different data, completely different model. So it is consistent with the rupture. We can look at it along dip. So this is along dip, and this is the rupture propagate. This is the time of the rupture propagation. Again, different types of symbols at different arrays. You can see that between 20 and 30 seconds, rupture started to separate. And by the time rupture ends at 1 minute, 60 seconds, they are completely separate, very clearly separate. And if you look at the seismic radiated energy, or proxy for moment rate, essentially, you will see that there is a peak energy between 20 and 30 seconds somewhere when the rupture started to bifurcate, and then the energy decreases rapidly. And then it stops at 60 seconds or so. So what is happening? This is the cartoon view of all of this information together, essentially. So rupture starts here. It propagated east, southeast, and right around here, kind of in the middle of the rupture, it produced the it reaches the peak of its seismic radiation. And from here, rupture started to bifurcate. One branch went to the relatively up deep part, another branch went to the relatively down deep part. And in fact, that defines the aftershock seismicity. The dots in red and yellow are actually the aftershocks. So this is the rupture propagation story of Gorka earthquake, main shock. I would also like to draw your attention to these two lines. This is the map view. This is the cross section. So we have very sharp ending of the seismicity right here. And it is visible both on map view and cross-section view right here. Okay, we do have stations east of this. We just don't have earthquake. So for whatever reason, earthquake just stops there, right there, and you can just see it both in map view and cross-section. And we'll come back to that later. I just wanted to kind of give you a hint of what to look for. So in terms of rupture dynamics, summarizing, rupture propagated east-southeast and then bifurcates. And the bifurcation the start of the bifurcation coincides with the peak seismic energy radiation. In this case, high frequency radiation. We're imaging using high frequency radiation. Rupture wraps around the aftershock zone in the eastern side. An earthquake right after that start of the bifurcation, earthquake starts to die out. The radiation, seismic radiation starts to decrease, and eventually rupture stops at 60 seconds or so. So this is kind of the summary of the rupture dynamics as we have imaged using seismological techniques. So now that we talk about rupture dynamics a little bit, let's talk about the structural control. So here the question we're asking, okay, so we know how the rupture dynamics are working here, but what is responsible for this type of dynamics? Bifurcation and wrapping around this aftershock zone, etc. So I'll show you a bunch of seismicity plots. And before that, I would like to clarify that I'm going to show two aftershock catalogs. Sometime this, sometime that. And one aftershock catalog, I use a conventional approach. So that is the approach one here. And by conventional approach, I mean that I use STLTA-based phase peaking, short time window versus long time window. Then I use those phase peaks to get absolute location using hypo-inverse. And then I get those location relocated using hypo-DD. So it's a double difference algorithm. So it's more precise. And then there is another catalog I'm going to show you that uses machine learning based approach. So it's a deep learning based. So what we do that we use convolutional neural network to detect earthquakes. And then we use recurrent neural network to pick phases. And then once we have the phases from this machine learning approach, we get locations using hypo-inverse and hypo-DD, which is the absolute and relative relocation. Now, I would like to point out that for this machine learning approach, we actually train our machine learning model using this data and catalog using conventional approach. So in other words, this machine learning model is customized for this network for this area. It is not like a global model downloaded from somewhere. It is actually made for this particular area. So it should be really, really good. And the bottom line is both catalogs show generally similar seismicity patterns. But the conventional approach, it's kind of good for large scale features. And for machine learning based catalog, it is good for very detailed features. So I'll kind of switch back and forth between two different catalogs. So you'll see slightly different things when I show you seismicity plot. So conventional approach, I think it's very common and well known. but I'll talk a little bit about the machine learning approach we do. So first we detect using this convolutional neural network. So we basically say, okay, which one is earthquake, which one is not. So we get those events, and then we use a recurrent neural network phase picking. We get both P and S phases by that. And once we have that, we train using conventional based catalog. So first we have a kurtosis based picker, we call it PAL, a software. Then we use those conventional earthquake to train the machine learning model. Once the training is complete, we use the picker, machine learning learned picker to pick, and then we associate them, then use hypo-inverse and hypo-DD to get absolute location and relative location. And then you can get cross-correlation based catalog and things like that. So that's in a nutshell how we do the machine learning part. So that's all I want to talk about the methodology. It's very summarized, but if you want to know more, you can talk to me later. So this is the aftershock location. This is based on conventional approach. We have 8,000-9,000 events here, but it's a very well located events. Typically, this catalog contains 18,000 or so events. We just plotting the very best event here. So this colored patch is the slip based on geodetic model. So you can see the slip is mostly concentrated in the western part, and the aftershocks are kind of at the edge of the slip. So that's the aftershock. Lots of aftershock in the eastern part, not so much in the western part. And if you draw a cross section approximately along this blue line and project everything on this blue line, you see something like this. You see some kind of horizontal structure here, maybe some kind of horizontal structure here, and then this big blob of seismicity here. And this looks not so good because I also plotted a vertical and horizontal bar to show you the error. And the vertical error is 2-3 kilometers or so. Horizontal error are slightly less. So it is actually very good quality events. But nevertheless, all you see is kind of a blob of seismicity, and then maybe a horizontal line here and a small horizontal line here. But we can actually see more if we can take smaller slices along across the strike. So for example, we have drawn this line perpendicular to the strike and plotted smaller slices. This one is the easternmost slice because it's the width is the largest, so you see more clearly. So that one, and you can see how seismicity in cross section shows a pattern. In the lower panel, we see the same seismicity pattern just in contour. And hopefully I don't have to guide your eyes too much to show that there are linear pattern that emerges. So here, and in contour line, these are even more clear. So we have parallel, steeply dipping, linear features defined by the seismicity. And the way we interpret it is this. We also take a look at the focal mechanism from Bai and colleagues. What we see is that along the base of that blob of seismicity, where we see those steeply dipping structure, the earthquakes has a focal mechanism very consistent with a low angle, very shallow angle thrust fault. And when we go inside this blob of seismicity, the angle changes. So fault is now very steep. So it is, focal mechanism is consistent with what we are seeing in the seismicity pattern. And we interpret this as a duplex. So instead of having a just flat, ramp flat geometry, what we are looking at here is actually a duplex connected by two horizontal planes shifted approximately vertically 2 kilometers. So a horizontal plane, which is the MHT, connected by a duplex structure. And the steeply dipping planes are basically the imbricate thrust within the duplex. And we have the base as sole thrust and a roof thrust, and the seismicity kind of disappear beyond base, sole thrust and roof thrust. So we presented this new model of MHT in this paper. It is published in Nature Geoscience. Mac Mendoza was my graduate student. He's now an NSF postdoctoral fellow. But I cannot claim that I discover duplex here, because it has been found or inferred by many geologists. Many folks in India published paper, geologists mainly, based on surface data. They inferred duplex at subsurface. This is just two examples from DCLS and Robinson, but there are other papers. So geologists were inferring duplex for a long time. What I show here is basically the most clearest picture I have seen so far of duplex reflected by the seismicity. So if you look at the other models, again, we have various models of MHT in this part of the world. So if you look at other models in different parts of the Himalayan arc around this area, not maybe exactly that, but around that area, you see very similar pattern during in the duplex area. Essentially, they're all crossing that area, but instead of resolving the details, they're kind of just going through that area in the middle. What we are doing here is to actually resolving the details in the seismicity that allows us to image this duplex. So in a way, these are consistent with other models, really. It's just that previous model, they didn't have the resolution to see the duplex. In this case, we have that. My colleague Roby Dewey also did some seismic tomography. This is body wave tomography, P-wave. And what we see is that right in the duplex area, we have a low velocity zone, approximately 5 to 6% low P anomaly, P velocity. So it is consistent with the idea that you have imbricate thrust, lots of damage, lots of faulting, and therefore low velocity of body waves. So it is consistent with seismic velocity structure as well. So what we have learned so far in terms of structure, we learned that I present a fault geometry of MHT with new details. It's more clear and of course more complicated fault geometry, unlike just flat ram flat. What we see is upper and lower sub-horizontal planes, which is the MHT, connected by the duplex structure. So it's a duplex structure is characterized by steeply dipping imbricate faults. But one aspect I didn't really talk about is the lateral variability. And you might ask that, well, okay, we see the duplex here, but do you see the duplex everywhere? The answer is actually no, we don't. So what does that mean? To explore that idea, to kind of think about that question, I would like you to think about this picture. It's a very familiar picture, right? It's a Himalayan lithologic unit, and you can see the main tectonic boundary faults, Himalayan faults in the Himalayan arc. But on top of that, you also have these red lines, which is almost perpendicular to the strike of the plate boundary. So a famous one is Delhi Haridwar Ridge, for example. And if you think about some faults near the Gorkha earthquake. You can see West Patna fault, East Patna fault. And if you project these faults, it actually goes right in the heart of the aftershock zone. And these faults are known for a long time, but people really did not study these as much. These are called cross faults, and we have seen it elsewhere too, not just Himalaya. This is not unique to Himalaya. But these cross faults are abundant in Himalayas and kind of less understood and poorly studied. So let's think about keeping that in mind. Let's see what we can see in the data. So in this particular exercise, we are going to look at the details of the seismicity, and therefore we are going to look at the catalog that I have made using a machine learning technique. So that's why we're seeing lots of earthquakes. So this is almost more than double the events we can see. But again, as I mentioned, if you look at the other catalog, which is the conventional catalog, the general feature is the same. You have more event here in the eastern side, less event here. Cross section, you have more event here, less event here. So generally, it's very similar. We just have more details in the machine learning catalog, which is important actually. Okay, so what we can see that there are significant lateral variation. In fact, you can draw very clear boundary in the seismicity zone. So this is, let's say, we call it the eastern zone, which is the most productive area of aftershock. And this is, let's call it western zone, which is this part, which is not as productive. And if you look at the cross section also, you see that this, in the eastern part, you have fairly well-defined MHT in the eastern side, defined by the seismicity. The western side is kind of complicated, and there are lots of shallow events. So there are clearly different seismic pattern. And the duplex that I showed you previously are mostly visible in the eastern side. We didn't see the duplex in the western side. Now, does that mean duplex doesn't exist in western side? We do not know that. Maybe it does exist, but we do not. It's just not active. We don't know. But in the data, we do see a duplex in the eastern side, not very clearly in the western part. Now, if you look at the seismic velocity structure, we see basically the same thing. So this is the eastern part. You see this low velocity structure associated with the duplex. And then we see the eastern part that is not as low velocity. In fact, there are some high velocity structure in the eastern part. So the seismicity pattern is actually consistent with what we see in the seismic velocity model in this area. So coming back to that sharp boundary, it is interesting to note that the seismicity ends really abruptly at the eastern edge where Rupture stopped. It is visible in map view and also visible in the cross-sectional view here. In fact, if you look at other areas in the eastern part, you see multiple vertical linear structure of seismicity. So this is the one that kind of separates the eastern part from the western. So it's a vertical, you see a vertical seismicity pattern, another vertical, and obviously the eastern end, which is also a very abrupt vertical ending. And in some cases, you see this vertical structure actually extending beneath the plate boundary, beneath the MHT. So this one and this one is probably vertically related, this one and that one, things like that. So the point I'm trying to make here, there are multiple vertical structures like cross faults. Cross faults are supposed to be vertical or near vertical structure that is perpendicular to the strike of the main Himalayan arc. So what we see, this most active aftershock zone in the eastern part is bounded by these two sharp boundaries of seismicity, which are mostly vertical from as defined by the seismicity. So we see these abrupt seismicity boundaries. The eastern part is bounded by two sharp boundaries of seismicity. One associated with the peak seismic radiation, which is the start of the rupture bifurcation, which is this one. So this one is associated. This is where the bifurcation starts, and this is where we see the peak of the seismic radiation. And beyond that, the rupture started to die, meaning that the seismic radiation decreases rapidly. And the other is associated with the arrest of rupture. So this one is where the rupture ends abruptly. We don't know, actually. There is a good question why rupture did not continue to propagate towards east and perhaps update. So perhaps that's something we can think about. So the fact that these two boundaries are associated with two important aspects of rupture dynamics are probably not a coincidence. These steeply dipping crossfall type structure perhaps play an important role in defining the rupture dynamics. So in summary, the duplex structure along MHT, it presents a new model of main Himalayan thrust. And this is important because we model MHT or Himalayan earthquake, and for any model, whether it's geodetic or dynamics, you need an accurate fault geometry. There are lots of debate about geometry. We think at least here a duplex structure is there. It's not simple flat ram flat. We also see strong structural control over Gorkha rupture. I hopefully convince you that the structure is really complicated here with lots of vertical, perhaps cross faults, and those have important controls on the rupture, Gorkha rupture dynamics. Structural complexity to the east, where majority of the aftershocks are, affects the rupture propagation. We see abrupt termination of seismicity, perhaps again cross faults, and all these structures may have played a critical role in arresting and controlling the Gorkha rupture. So what does that mean? It's one earthquake, right? In a small piece of entire Himalayan arc. So if this structure does really control the rupture boundaries, then these structures likely exist in other parts of the Himalayan, and perhaps in other parts of the Himalaya control the past and future earthquakes. So what that means that these structures might define the segment boundaries along the Himalayan arc, which in turn define the size of the earthquake, and that would be very, very important to estimate seismic hazard. So lastly, I would say that these new techniques that I have shown here, machine learning based catalog and analyzing the details of small earthquakes, I think it can has immense potential to extract new information from the data set, and not just new data set, but the old data set, existing data set that you may already have or collected. So I hope to see more of these newer technique applied to the data to extract more important information and high resolution image of the faults in the Himalayas and everywhere else, in Koina or Bhuj, anywhere that is seismically active. With that, I thank you for your attention, and I am happy to take questions if there is time.
Thank you so much, sir,
Yeah.
for such a wonderful and enlightening lecture. Now, may I request our uh, our eminent geophysicist, Dr. Jean Hordbeck from USGS, who has joined us today for this lecture to provide her remarks on this session. Over to you, ma'am.
Oh, thank you for giving me an opportunity to comment on what was a really fantastic talk. Thank you for a very clear and interesting look at the controls on the Gorka earthquake. I was particularly impressed by the resolution you were able to achieve on the main shock rupture, especially given the distance to those stations you used. That was truly impressive. So that's terrific work. Thank you for showing that. One question I did have was I was sort of curious about the aftershock, the magnitude 7.3 aftershock, and how that might relate to some of these structures you were able to image, how that might relate to the duplex structures or to the vertical cross faults, and whether that earthquake was large enough to be able to look at how there might have been some structural controls on that as well. So again, thank you very much for a really great talk.
Thank you, Jean. Good to see you.
Thank you so much, ma'am. Now, may I request our session chairperson, respected Professor J.R. Kayal, sir, to provide his remarks on this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anessa.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. At the outset, we must congratulate Dr. Abhijit Ghosh for such a wonderful presentation and very precise work. I think I have got two comments. One is, I think you have very precisely, revealed that how the structure control the structure. I mean, how the structural controls the ruptures of any large earthquake in Himalaya. So there was a lot of debates on mega earthquake forecast in the Himalaya, and we had a lot of debates on that the Himalayan rupture cannot have a rupture for a mega earthquake because there are a lot of transfer structure, and I think this is one of the best precise work that you have presented. How the structure in the Himalaya, particularly the transverse structure in the Himalaya, which are very much visible in the geologically and also by seismic studies, how they control the rupture. This is one point that I really appreciate your work very much. The other query I have got, how you will interpret the low velocity in the duplex. It is because of the crash shocks due to the rupture, or what? How you will interpret this low velocity structure in the duplex in the high seismic zone? Yes, please. Over to Abhijit.
Yeah, thank you for your kind comments. Appreciate it. It's a very good question. So the question is, what does that mean when you see some low velocity structure in the duplex? So the way we interpret it is that a duplex structure has more faults relative to its surrounding because it is stacked by some imbricate thrusts, steeply dipping imbricate thrust. And that leads to more damaged rock and therefore low velocity relative to the surrounding rock. So that's how we interpret the duplex structure. And this interpretation is consistent not only just in this cross section, but if you look at this cross section, which is along strike, you can see that the entire eastern section where we see the duplex structure is actually characterized by a low velocity anomaly. You go to the western section where we don't see the duplex structure seismically, it's not as high velocity. In fact, there are some low velocity structure. So it seems like this low velocity structure is associated spatially, whether you look at along strike or along dip, with the duplex structure. And perhaps that is reflecting the more damaged rock than the surrounding because of the duplex structure.
Okay, thank you so much, Abhijit. Thank you so much for your very nice presentation. And over to Anessa for any questions, if there are, it can be attended by Abhijit. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I request Dr. Ajay Manglik, Chief Scientist from CSIR NGRI, to provide his remarks on this session. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Anvisha, and thanks, Abhijit, for an excellent talk. In fact, this is a paramount question that what is the rupture area which is available for rupture, which addresses the question of what could be the likely magnitude of earthquake in Himalaya, as Professor Kayal has also mentioned. This is very, very pertinent question. And in fact, we are also trying to address this question, especially Northwest Himalaya. Something which is interesting to me, which appears, is that why do these duplex structure form? What stops the wedge to propagate southward, leading to this duplex structure? So, in fact, what is the coupling between the wedge and the underlying Indian plate? So we are talking of transverse structures, but are the mechanical properties of these structures or composition of these structures controlling these duplexes? So in a sense, can we look into the coupling aspect, which prohibit propagation of wedge southward? So if we can address also those questions, that would be very useful. I'm really pretty happy that you have used new advanced techniques of machine learning to really dig into the data, which were not seen earlier. You could find different patterns. This is really welcome step to look into entire data set of the Himalaya. I'm sure you are aware of that one program in Northwest Himalaya where we have a big network, which is operated by Dr. Ravi Kumar, and we also this is led to also environmental seismology things. So a lot of these data are there where these ML techniques can be applied. So I compliment you for an excellent talk and raising very, very pertinent questions related to Himalaya. Thank you very much. Over to
Thank you, Dr. Mangalik.
Okay, thank you, sir. Now, may I request Dr. Vivit Suryanto, our session co-chairperson, to provide his remarks on this session. Over to you, sir.
So thank you very much, but I'm sorry, I'm entering the room quite late, so it's at the end of Dr. Abhijit talk. But yeah, I think it is always interesting, yeah, to study the rupture, especially relating to the complex structure at the subsurface. For simulation, what kind of techniques you use, Mr. Abhijit, Dr. Abhijit?
Yeah, so this one is mostly based on observational seismology. So basically aftershock, relocation, and what small aftershock can tell us about the structure and what those structure means in terms of rupture dynamics. So once we have a better handle of the structure, we can give that to the modeler, let's say a dynamic modeler, and you can use that structure to accurately model perhaps future earthquake or maybe multiple cycles of earthquakes. But all these simulations are model dependent, meaning that if your geometry is wrong, your model is wrong, right? So you want to be as accurate as possible in terms of fault geometry. So I think what this study does is to take one step close to a more realistic, although more complex, geometry of the main Himalayan thrust.
Okay, that's very cool. So congratulations, it's really amazing research. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Suryanto.
Thank you, sir. Now, may I request Dr. V.K. Gehlot to provide a brief remarks on this session, who is present amongst us. He's the Chief Scientist from CSIR NGRI. Over to you, sir.
Oh, hi, Avi. I didn't expect this. Hey, how are you?
Hello, Dr. Galat. I'm very good. How about yourself?
Oh, yeah, I
See you
heard
again.
earlier. So nice to see your results on this. I mean, uh, yesterday there was a paper which appeared in Geology which talks about the effect of duplex and its influence on seismic moment release. I mean, how does it sort of influence the strain budget of especially in the Himalayan arc. So in that way, the duplex structures are becoming more and more important, especially when it comes to seismic hazard as well. So in that sense, I mean, it's unfortunate that these earthquakes they cause fatalities, but it's only through these earthquakes and the data generated by these earthquakes that helps us in understanding the structures and dynamics of the process. And you have done a wonderful job. There's no doubt about it. I mean, exploiting all these aftershocks, uh, several thousands of them, and then looking at the structure inside. That's fantastic. So nice to see Abhijit here. I have just one remark. I mean, not remark, but kind of query that you mentioned those faults in on the Indian plate, for example, Patna fault. So I'm curious as to so these are the faults on the footwall side, right? So when they enter the Himalayan collision zone, and then you showed those structures, vertical structures, which were cutting across the wedge, going right into the into the Indian plate, right, cutting across the main Himalayan thrust. So how does that happen? I mean, I'm sort of, how does the inherited structure of Indian plate cut across the Himalayan wedge, if that's what you actually meant to say? How does it happen? That's something which I'm curious about.
That is excellent question, Dr. Gallup. I'll try to comment on it. What I think about it. Let me go to that slide.
I'm sorry, I didn't want to sort of disturb the schedule here.
Okay.
So yeah,
Okay.
in case we are running short of time, I can talk to him directly. I mean, Anvesha, it's up to you.
It's okay, sir. You may continue.
Abhijit, yes.
Okay. So let me show you this. So there are many theories on this. So yes, you're correct that it is supposedly inherited structure of the Indian plate, but in some cases, even before this work, there are suggestions that the Indian plate, subducting Indian plate, has tear in it. Tear. So when you have a teared slab, that tear needs to somehow manifest in the upper plate, right? So over time, I think these are those manifestation of slab tear that we see in the transverse structure. Uh, in this particular case, actually, there are two faults that is mapped, meaning that we can see it at the surface. One is Gauri-Shankar lineation. It was mapped using remote sensing data, satellite image. One is Benker fault. Both are very close to this sharp ending, even although it does not coincide perfectly with it. But then you have the dip and everything. So the point we're making that perhaps there are many such vertical transverse structures. Some of them perhaps we can see and map at the surface, but there are many blind such structures that are there, perhaps influencing the rupture dynamics, segmentation, etc. If we have a good catalog like this, perhaps we can map those out and figure out which one is important for segmentation. Not all the structure would be important for segmentation. For example, we have multiple of these vertical structure, but they don't really stop the rupture, right? But one did, it seems like. So unless we know where those structures are, there is no way we can actually attempt to answer the question, where is the segment boundary? But yeah, I think it's an interaction between those pre-existing structure that is subducting and the upper plate rheology.
Thanks, Abhi. Thanks to see you again. Yeah.
Yeah, likewise.
Okay. Thank you, sir. Now, may I request our session co-chairperson, Dr. Debojit Hazarika from Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology, to say a few words on this occasion.
Thank you so much. Professor Abhijit Ghosh, it was really an excellent talk, and I liked your talk and this research that you have carried out recently in Nepal earthquake. And I'm very much fortunate that I could get the opportunity to review your paper and go into detail of this. So I really congratulate you for this excellent piece of work. And as you have shown the seismicity, I'm very much curious to apply similar kind of artificial intelligence and the machine learning in Himalaya, because we have a lot of data, but which are, I think, underutilized. It is not properly utilized. So you have done that great job that you have taken quite a good amount of data, maybe about 30,000 data you have utilized. And I have seen in the paper also that you have utilized some earthquakes of negative magnitude. So that is good. The only one thing I want to know, how it is difficult to use the negative magnitude earthquake. One thing is how it helps it, and next how it is possible to locate the earthquakes. Is there any difficulty in locating these small negative magnitude earthquakes?
Right. No, that's a great question. Thank you. I appreciate your comments, kind words. I absolutely agree with you 100% that we could do a lot more with the existing data set. I mean, of course, we can get more data, and that's fine. But even if we can use these newer, more advanced AI-based or machine learning-based technique, we can extract more and more information from the existing data set. And I call it, in my mind, I call it a power of small earthquakes. In other words, typically we study large earthquakes and tend to ignore the small earthquakes. What we are doing in this study, actually focusing on the small earthquakes. We are looking at and finding those small earthquakes because it's a logarithmic increase, right? Every magnitude increase, you have tenfold more events. So if you can push your magnitude completeness from 2 to 1 or 1 to even lower, then you are basically increasing the number of earthquakes by 10 folds. And that dramatically reveal the structure really, really in high resolution. And that is the result you are seeing. But it does require a careful training, training of your model, essentially. So there are AI-based models that are available that are supposed to work globally. We tried that; it didn't work very well. It's not very good, different from traditional STLTA-based method. But if you can actually develop a training data set and train your model using that network, using for that area, it can do magic, essentially. Even using the old data set that we have. So I absolutely 100% agree that we should do more with the existing data set using this machine learning technique. We just need to train our model that is customized for us, for let's say Indian Himalaya. And then it would be not difficult to increase the resolution of the images, fault structure of Himalaya, even without a large earthquake. I mean, just background seismicity. If you have 2-3 years of background seismicity using this type of model, can reveal quite a bit of the structure, even without a large magnitude earthquake and aftershock.
Thank you, Professor Abhijit. Thank you so much, and congratulations for this wonderful.
Thank you, Dr. Hazarika.
Anvesha, you're muted.
Thank you, sir. With your kind permission, we would like to have an interactive session. So we have a few questions from some of the attendees. So we have Mrs. G. Swati. So may we have her to ask the question, please? We also have Himanshu Paul and KVRH Prasad and Sandeep Gupta accordingly. So they may ask the question.
You need to give permission to these guys to ask questions because I think the mic is muted from your end.
So I would like to request Mr. Shakta Bhattacharya to permit
Yes,
them
actually,
to ask their question.
I have already enabled their mics, so they can ask one by one. Currently, Himanshu Paul's mic is unmuted.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes,
we can hear you, please.
Yeah, good to see you, Dr. Abhijit, and thank you for the wonderful talk. So I'm Himanshu Pal from CSR and GRI. So my question to Dr. Abhijit Ghosh is that, so I believe that the duplex is somewhere in the region where the rupture bifurcated. Is it right?
That is correct. That's where the duplex structure. We start to see the duplex structure.
Yeah. So what, my question is that in one hand, the duplex is facilitating sleep, so that earthquakes are happening inside the duplex in imbricate structure. On the other hand, the same duplex is also arresting the rupture, so that the rupture is bifurcated to the side of the duplex. That's the first. So how do you explain these contradictory things by the same duplex? First thing. And the second questions I wanted to ask is that the duplex, as you can see in the classical images of the duplex, although there are imbricate structures, lots of imbricate structures on the duplex, the end of the duplex, say north of the duplex, although the images show that there is nothing, but in actual there is something, at least there is no gap. So those walls are equally likely to slip rather than they equally likely to slip than the imbricate structure within. So how do you means why there is a more chances of structures within the duplex, earthquakes within the duplex rather than north of it or south of it? So that's the second question. Yeah, thank you.
Himanshu, good to see you again. Great questions. So I'll address the first one first, which is that how does a duplex encourage and discourage the rupture at the same time, right? So I think what is happening here, that the rupture starts and it hits the duplex, but it's a moving locomotive train, right? You cannot just stop a train right there. So as soon as it hits the duplex, I think it starts to slow down, if you will, in this analogy, but not stop, but slow down. There are slips that is still occurring within the duplex and along the MHT, so kind of the soul thrust part of it. But there will be some time before you can stop that running locomotive engine, if you will, right? It's a big rupture that is propagating a huge amount of rock. You cannot really stop just right there. So I think it is not hard to imagine that the duplex had some role to play in slowing down the rupture, if you will, but it did not really slow down instantly, but it took some time, in this case about half a minute or so, until it hits that transverse structure, it seems like, at the very east. In terms of whether we have sleep in the north, south, or imbricate thrust, I don't think that there is any problem with having sleep at the northern edge or the southern edge or in between. We see seismicity all over the place, essentially, within that boundary that we define as duplex. And that boundary is essentially defined by the seismicity. Now, that not to say that duplex ends there. That is the boundary of duplex. That might be the boundary of the active part of the duplex, right? So some of those transverse structure that we see, we don't see it anywhere in the seismicity before this earthquake, right? There is no report of those structures in the seismicity. So one possibility is perhaps we don't have enough data, or this techniques has not been applied. But the other possibility is perhaps those are kind of dormant structure, and those structures are activated now because of this big stress event, which is the Gorkha earthquake, right? So there are many possibilities, but I think it's perfectly fine for the duplex to have slip in between the inverted thrust or north or south. We can't really distinguish, or we don't see any pattern that we have slip here but not there, etc. Does that answer your question, Himanshu?
Yeah, it does. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Okay, now, due to scarcity of time, the participants may actually send their queries via emails to the speaker. So so we would like to end this session here. And thank you so much, sir. Now, may I request Mr. Navojyoti Molia, who is the Junior Research Fellow of CSIR NEIST, to deliver the vote of thanks. Over to you, Mr. Molia.
Thank you, Anvisa. Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible.
Yeah. Namaskar. A pleasant good morning to all from India. As today's event has come to an end, it is my pleasure to convey hearty thanks to everyone on behalf of entire CSIR NEST family and organizing committee of IVWGST 2022. I would like to take this opportunity to thank Dr. Abhijit Ghosh from University of California, USA, for promptly accepting our invitation with anticipation and delivering such an educative talk on structural complexities control rupture dynamics of 2050 Gorkha earthquake. Thank you once again, sir, for such a wonderful and enlightening lecture. It was such a great pleasure to have you among us as a keynote speaker in today's session. Our deep sense of gratitude and thanks go to Honorable Director Dr. G. Narahari Sastry of CSIR NEIST, Jorhat, for his enormous concern and moral support to successfully conduct the live session with us. Once again, a hearty regards to you, sir. I further take this opportunity to express our profuse gratitude and heartfelt thanks to our session chairperson, Professor J.R. Kyle, former Deputy Director General of GSI, Government of India, and session's co-chairpersons, Dr. Wiwit Suryanto from UGM Indonesia and Dr. Debajit Hazarika from Wadia Institute of Himalayan Geology, Dehradun, for their decision commitment towards the event and providing needful guidance. I would also like to thank special guest of our today's session, Dr. Ajay Mangalik from CSI NGRI, Dr. Jean Hyderabad from USGS USA, and Dr. Vinit K. Gaulat from CSI NGRI Hyderabad for their gracious presence despite busy schedule. Once again, I take this opportunity to thank Dr. Santanu Borwa, convener of IVWGST 2022, for his vigorous devotion for this international live session meets. We once again sincerely thank him a lot for bestowing this opportunity to unite laureates from different regions of the world under a single online podium. A special thanks to all the members of technical committee and organizing committee for their enormous support, dedication, teamwork, and persistent effort in successfully organizing this event. Last but foremost, I express my deep sense of appreciation to all the attendees for their active involvement and cooperation in today's event, without which this event would not have been a success. Further, I solicit your continued support during the course of this workshop and look forward to see you all for the next technical session, which will go live at 10 a.m. tomorrow. Our keynote speaker for tomorrow's session is Dr. Jean Hardbeck from USGS USA with her lecture on what causes aftershocks. With this, I conclude this session with hearty regards and anticipation. Thank you all for your precious presence and for making this event a successful. Thank you.
Thank you, Navojyoti, and everyone for organizing this. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Abhijit.
Thank you, Abhijit.